right, today I have Keegan Smith, the ex-Roosters strength and conditioning coach and founder of ATG for coaches. He's the ATG mentor. Welcome. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me on, Pat.
So today I'm going to get Tim to talk a little bit about his time at the Roosters and strength and conditioning for rugby league players and what he'd do differently now and how ATG actually could really help out rugby players and rugby league players. So Keegan, give me a rundown. How was it in 2013 at the Roosters? What was your focus then?
Yeah, so when I went into the club, I looked at the programs that they'd been doing before, and there were sort of papers laying around from the previous year's training, and I knew roughly what had been going on because my father was the head coach the year before I was there, and my brother was the assistant coach. And I'd been to the club 2 years before that, before I went to Catalan Dragons. So I had a rough idea of the culture of strength and what they'd been going through there for a while. And I looked at the programs and I saw that a lot of the guys were using the same weights and not much weight for lower body training and sort of more power, concentric focus. And then upper body, everyone was training hard and heavy as they tend to, so the bench press and all that was being trained to a high degree of intensity. And then the snatches and cleans and whatnot, the weights would have been okay if it was an under 15 girls team, but other than that, probably not that good. So they were using them for speed, I guess, and for just in a different way to what I sort of would use them. So that's set the foundation, and then I brought in a different approach and really went pretty aggressive with it because we weren't expected to make the finals. Trent Robinson was only expected to be there 1 year. There was already reports about Bellamy was going to be the coach, and it was just an interim thing with this rookie coach, like a caretaker type role, because no top coaches were available. He's still there as the coach, and that year was the start of a dynasty. So, we did things differently, and we got a different result. Obviously, we won the premiership that year and set an all-time defensive record for 0 score lines, and won the minor premiership and the club championship and the World Club Challenge, and it was a very successful year. I think the strength program contributed something to that. Obviously, it's only one piece of the puzzle, but that was 2013.
Yeah, why do you think they didn't have a legs focus, a heavy legs focus before he came in? That doesn't really make sense to me.
Well, it was actually the same at the Catalan Dragons as well, where they actually stopped training legs because they were having too many leg injuries. And the players said, like the strength coach said, we're not going to train legs anymore because we're getting too many leg injuries. And that was like a well-known strength coach. I think he's gone on to coach the Kangaroos, and he'd been to a number of different clubs. And the guys clearly didn't have an acceptable level of leg strength. They'd been sort of told that was what you needed to do, but they'd also come last, which helped as far as the players and the club being ready to sort of change and to try something different. The Roosters had come second or third last the year before I was there as well. So, I was fortunate to go to clubs that were kind of ready for a cultural shift and a shift in the program, and I wouldn't have probably had it any other way. So it worked well in that sense. But there's so many misconceptions. People think that they're going to become muscle bound, or they're going to be tight in the legs, or if the legs are too fatigued, then the conditioning work is not going to be able to get done. That's a big consideration, and it is something you have to balance, right? A lot of clubs want to do a lot of running, and so you have to consider that is actually strength training as well. And if you're a heavy guy, then a field session is a strength training session, because we should be talking about tension rather than strength. Nobody doesn't strength train. If you get out of bed in the morning, if you run around, then you're training tension, which is a strength stimulus. It's just a question of exactly what joint angles that strength stimulus is delivered with, and what amount of tension is created, etc. So you do have to look at what else is going on other than what's happening in the weight room. But yeah, I mean, there's so much advantage to be gained. You won't see anyone at the Olympics in the javelin or the shot put or the discus that's not training legs. Like it's not possible to become world class in these events without developing those muscles. So if you take that to a team sport, then clearly there's going to be an advantage if you have somewhat closer force output capabilities than those sort of highest power athletes in the world.
Yeah, definitely. Like it actually doesn't make sense in my mind at all to not have as strong legs as possible for rugby or rugby league. It doesn't matter. Like you have to be able to put out a lot of force. And it's quite obvious. Like if you actually have a look at the best athletes, the best ball runners, their legs are huge. And it's not usually the other way around. You know, you might get some smaller guys that are good at stepping and quite agile and can bust the line that way. But it's you know, it's always the big guys with the bigger legs can bust through more tackles and they can tackle easier. Like that just makes sense.
It's definitely a strong trend of bottom heavy athletes being more resilient and more difficult to deal with. The skinnier type guys that you're talking about generally have much more developed legs and they're just weak on the upper body. And then, you know, the strength coach goes and changes that and shifts all the protein to the upper half and the protein goes out of the lower half. And then, you know, injuries can easily follow with that. So we talk about building athletes from the ground up. We talk about building, you know, lower body dominant athletes. Not so much posterior chain dominance. You know, that's something that I was on for a while as a buzz, like listening to Westside Barbell and that sort of stuff. But we don't want to have posterior chain dominance. We want to have balance between the numbers in all areas of the body, and it should start with that from the ground up philosophy. So there's no bias in the numbers that we're going for posterior chain versus anterior. And yeah, I mean, what I did in 2013, 14, you know, working with professional athletes is different to what I do now because I've learned things since then. And if you're not contradicting your former self, then you haven't learned anything, you haven't changed. And that's not a good place in any area of life, but especially with your strength training. And there are new developments and we do understand things a lot better. You know, the programs that worked 20 years ago, there's things about them that are good, but we do have new understanding and better understanding of how to develop the human body and human engineering. And, you know, a lot of the programs were built on bodybuilding and powerlifting and even weightlifting, but the running athlete is none of those things. You know, so those programs will always be limited.
The running power athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
exactly.
Totally different.
Yeah. So that concept of building from the ground up, really focusing on calf and foot development, tibialis anterior, building massive strength in that knees over toes sort of position, things like the natural knee extension or the reverse Nordic. I've never seen used in a professional sporting program, but they are becoming, you know, more widely accepted and mainstream now. Getting full Nordics like the Martin St. Louis Nordic, again, like something I'd only seen one player sort of being able to do those cheetah Nordics during my time coaching. That was actually at London Broncos. That was in the early years. I've seen, you know, Trey Williams is the other guy that I've seen do it really well. He ran a 10-10-100 at, you know, 5'7". So success leaves clues. Like the physics of this stuff is really clear, but most coaches and most athletes haven't been exposed to it yet. You know, some would say it's arrogant to say, well, yeah, you know, this is the better stuff, but it's when you sit and think about it, when you look at the physics, it's very, very difficult to argue against the fact of more force production in these specific positions and specific muscles. And it is a different approach, so it challenges us to learn and evolve and try something different. But yeah, I mean, I was just chatting the other day with the head of performance for a Premier League soccer club, and he's doing the program himself. And he's got some issues there with the club where he's not able to implement it fully with the athletes that he's working with because of the politics of elite sport. But, you know, it's just so good and refreshing to see guys at that level are just taking it on for themselves and experiencing, I don't know everything, and I need to keep questioning and changing.
That's funny. I spoke to Ben Roberts about this today. He said, do you want to go into the professional sector? And it's never really interested me because I like working with the guys who want to push towards that. I love that, and that gives me free reign to program how I want to program, how I think is going to suit them best. And that means I can use all of what I learn and put it into that. And you're saying, well, why would you go? What would make you go into it? And I said, if they came and asked me to go into it, I would do it because that would give me the power to say, hey, you guys came and reached out for me. We're going to do this. Well, this is how we're going to do it. And that's funny with the elite sport. It's like, what's going to take for them to open up to new ideas and training and things that could be better? Like you spoke of the reverse Nordic before. That movement totally changed how I squat. My squats went through the roof, and I squat easily now. Just being able to dominate that movement.
Yeah, it's definitely changed my squat massively as well. And it's like, I think the VMO or hack squats also feed well into the reverse Nordic, and it's a different way of looking at strength. And I don't know anyone who's done it who doesn't think it's better. I know a lot of people who haven't done it who don't think it's better, who just criticize from a distance and want to stick with what they've been doing. But I don't know anyone who's actually done it who doesn't go, yeah, this is just, my body feels better, this works better. And that's that's the challenge that we face in a lot of areas at the moment. Like, people would rather not think, like people would rather die than think, is kind of a quote from Earl Nightingale that keeps rattling around in my brain at the moment. And for athletes and strength coaches, it's kind of the same thing. Like, rather just suffer the injuries and deal with the consequences than actually have to accept that, well, there's a better way to do this. There's better technology here. There's better information. And of course, like, there's the ATG system isn't perfect. It's not complete. There's a lot to learn every week. We're tweaking things and changing things, but the fundamental underpinnings of running athletes need something very different something additional to powerlifting, weightlifting, bodybuilding, CrossFit. All those things are their own sports, and they were never designed for human engineering. Like, ATG is the first system that I know of that's actually built around the way a baby functions, the way we're born, the way we're designed to function. It's the first system that I know that really builds on that. And it's obviously heavily influenced by Charles Poliquin, who was the most successful strength coach in history. But Charles was not obsessed with that human engineering, how we meant to be put together perspective. He had massive arms, and he, injured his shoulders getting to a 200 kilo bench press. And, he had his journey, and it was fantastic. The way he solved the problems of his shoulders and his arms actually turns out it works phenomenally for the legs. But that emphasis and that philosophy just didn't really come out of the Poliquin system as a core message, because it wasn't the core focus. And a lot of Poliquin coaches, developed big upper bodies and turned up with the big biceps and triceps to the Poliquin education events. But ultimately, the impact wasn't there in terms of shifting strength culture for the running athlete. And I think that's, it's exciting to see that that's happening. And I see it popping up in teams and athletes all around the world. And, sometimes the coach or the athlete thinks, yeah, well, I was sort of doing this before, but, we're gradually infiltrating with a better system. And ultimately, I think the truth will prevail in this strength world and in other challenges that, we're facing at the moment economically and health and things. But the best way to advocate for that is to be a product of it, and, to get results with it as a coach. Like, if you're facing resistance with this as a coach or as an athlete, work on it for yourself and show, that it works. And I know a lot of athletes feel like they're kind of boxed into a system if they're at a school and they're forced into a training program, or they're at a club. But there's so much of what, you're offering, Pat, that someone can implement on the side as well. Like, it doesn't have to be done at high intensity to cause massive changes. You can get a really big change without high intensity in these movements that will have that flow on performance effect, which is, so empowering as well.
Definitely. Oh yeah, I have actually quite a few kids who in that that elite school system, and it's pretty much that you have to do their program, and you look at their program, and it's something you would see in the 2000s. You know, like they have to do cleans and they have to do these type of their box squats. So I'm like, well, you know, they haven't developed the strength yet to even deserve to clean. You know, like what are they doing the cleans for? Like I use cleans in my programs, but after I've already developed strength, or after like I've got a client to a certain strength level, then I really then can incorporate cleans. Otherwise, I feel like I'm wasting my time. But I do use the base movement. So I use like from a clean pull, and I just get people to learn the movements first, and then use that as high repetition to train it into the brain, but also to bring blood flow to specific areas. And that's actually one of the ways I really enjoy incorporating weightlifting. But yeah, like
I love it. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
I think that's one of the powerful things that for ATG right now is you have yourself and you have Ben, and you're both quite open-minded to new ideas. And now you're getting more and more coaches trying this, seeing what works, what doesn't work, then experimenting a little bit, and then coming back and saying, hey, I've had really good results of this, like, and then, you know, everyone can discuss it out and try it themselves, and then the ATG system, it just grows a little bit. And
yeah.
I haven't seen many other systems that have allowed that.
I don't know of anyone else who's doing what we're doing as far as the research process goes. You know, every day we question the system, and questions are coming in from coaches all around the world saying, hey, I'm dealing with this thing at the moment. You know, how would you go about it? Or I've tried this is working better for me. And, you know, ultimately ATG is trying to build this foundation of human engineering that underpins any system. So, you can layer weightlifting on top of it, or you can layer, you know, sprinting on top of it, or basketball or gymnastics or whatever else you want to do. But there's like, how do we prepare the human body for what it's meant to be able to do in any kind of activity that, you know, is built on that sort of human foundation, like the abilities to run, jump, those sorts of things. And yeah, the feedback loop with coaches, and, you know, Ben's committed to being in there every day. Like I don't, you know, imagine if Charles was actually, you know, made himself successful. Instead it was like, you know, $1,000 a consult and whatever. But I think it would have progressed a lot faster had there been, you know, this approach. But the technology wasn't there yet, and you know, we grew up in different times. It's super exciting to think about, you know, that power of collaboration. And you know, you've seen it also on the side with, you know, learning from our mentor Paul, like the ability of when people come together with, you know, common interests and they're doing good things, then it brings better ideas forward, and everyone, you know, progresses faster. And you know, it hasn't been very long, and already, like, there've been so many developments in the last, you know, couple of years, but even in the last couple of months, like key improvements. So it's all just built on what's getting results, what works better, and just the small innovations are really coming in, like the regressions and progressions and ways to tweak the exercises and movements. And that's what I want coaches to have, like that real dexterity of like getting it right for the person in front of them on that day, rather than, you know, well, this is the one, you know, this is the one program, this is the one way of doing things. The more dexterity you have in terms of progression, regression, and, you know, shifting towards more stability, or shifting towards more power, or, you know, shifting towards more hypertrophy stimulus, etc. There's so much nuance within that. You know, like anyone can make a cake, but not anyone can be a Michelin 3-star chef, you know? And there's the same ingredients, but the details of how it all comes together decide whether it's worth, you know, thousands of dollars, or nothing, or, you know, just, you know, not valuable at all. So it's fun to see how it's evolving, for sure.
And the big thing for me out of this, or out of it, from what I see, is the results that it's bringing. It's just going to expand, because, you know, more athletes going to see it. Like, athletes have the power of the internet, and people are actually searching for solutions. And here's a solution that keeps on giving. Like, I haven't really seen too many people have a bad experience. Like, and I haven't experienced one. I'm sure you have, but it would probably come down to a user fault of not understanding, or we haven't languaged it right for them. Because
the psychology is a big thing, Pat. Like, people want to have the results yesterday, and they think, well, yeah, this is a great program, so I can just jump into it and smash it and everything's going to be good. But that's not how it works. Like, you have to work through the system. If you've had a lot of knee pain for a long time, you can't expect to just go hard at the strength standards and everything's going to resolve. Like, you have to use the system as it's intended to be used. Like, if you use a hammer to sort of polish your dishes, polish your silverware, it's not going to get the result that you want. So some of the movements are hammers, and then others are, the things that will help to get you back to being able to use the hammer. You know what I mean? Like, it's meant to be sequenced, and it has to be nuanced. And that's where I see the biggest challenges. But for sure, there's other problems within, like, how you get the message across, and how to implement the regressions, etc. So, it's going to keep just getting better and better as technology gets better, and we become more experienced within what we're doing. But the idea of that human error is always going to be there. Like, people are going to want to go faster than the body is able to adapt. Like, tendons and ligaments adapt slowly. It's the 6, 12, 24-month process for those structures to truly transform. Now, a lot of people experience a change in their pain and function in the first week or two, but you can't cheat that adaptation process of the connective tissues, the cartilage, etc. It's going to take time. And if people have had issues for 5, 10, 20, 50 years, then it's not all going to be resolved in the first week or the first month. But the case studies are there, and you're doing an amazing job in taking it to the rugby world, because ATG is just this base. It's not meant to be a program for rugby players. Like, it's the foundation that underpins that. Then you can go and put your rugby strength training on top of that, and get much better results. Like, you can do well with just what ATG is, but I wouldn't take the ATG program as it is into a club and only implement that. Like, you would get better results, I think, than a lot of what's being done. But I would tweak it. I would tweak it in ways that you are. And Pat, you see Pat Lane at the Roosters. It's coming into his way of thinking. He's not the head strength coach there anymore, or at the moment. So, but even what he was doing last year and the year before, it's up to each coach to live and die by the results. Like, we're not telling people, like, do it this one way. We're saying, like, this is a philosophy. These are tools. Live and die by how you use them. And so so far so good. Like, it's been a lot of fun.
So if you were to go back to an NRL club or any sort of sporting institute, say it's rugby, what would you be looking for? Like, what would your key indicators of performance be?
So that's probably a big shift. Like, I loved using the counter movement jump. I did use a lot of 1RM weightlifting as well. I kept lots and lots of numbers, 5-meter sprints, 10-meter sprints. I would always, take these numbers, rank them, publish them, put them up on the wall, and I would still do that. I do value that. But the most important numbers would be, where are the weaknesses in this athlete where they're most likely to become injured, and how do we deal with that? Where that wasn't my way of thinking before. If you can keep an athlete healthy and empower them in terms of the physics of force production in the areas where they're weakest, then you're going to get the best result. And, we had the lowest number of players used in 2013 and 2014. So we had to go least deep into the squad, which is one measure of, injuries, but also, like, the coach obviously selecting the same players because you're winning. But if that's the big role of the coach. Like, if you're going into a team with a weak roster, then you have to search a little bit more for those power gains. But ultimately, like, if your best players play all the time, if they train all the time, then you're doing a massive service for the team. So that's what I would go after, those specific strength deficits. So looking at, like, the ATG standards, and then just how far are they away from the standard deviation, how far are they away from the standards, and then how far away are they from the relative team norms, And it would be very, very interesting to see whether those specific strength challenges show up in the same places where they've had previous injuries and predisposition to future injuries. And I think with that approach, I wouldn't need to do as much kind of 1RM emphasis training, and I could keep the guys a lot fresher. We didn't do a lot of running conditioning and things like that. We did have the philosophy of kind of building through relative strength. Like if you have amazing relative strength, then endurance is easy, and very few athletes understand that. But if
I've always said that, and people don't understand. Yeah. It's a hard thing for someone to explain, though. So,
I explain it basically like, okay, if you put a 5 kilo weight vest on and we run a beep test, how much better are you going to do if we take that off? So it's the same thing when we become stronger. You're effectively making yourself lighter relative to your own body. So the lighter you feel to yourself, the easier it's going to be to throw yourself around and run. That's
how I explain ATG in a way, because I'm saying like to people, like, you're not going to have to do all your conditioning that you think in your off season if you do this system, because everything's going to be more effective. So if your calves and your tibs are stronger, you're going to be landing, and you're not going to be losing so much force. You're actually going to be bouncing out of it. And it's sort of that mind shift. It's like, oh, maybe I'm running shit uphill here. And that's what so many players are doing. Like that actually, because their bodies aren't well balanced, it's actually harder for them to perform any movement. So running is actually harder. When we get these balances in right, which is what ATG is made to do, we're trying to do from the ground up, and then people are going to run more effectively and more efficiently.
100%. And running can improve relative strength. It's just a very inefficient way of doing it. We know that strength training is more efficient to improve relative strength than just running. So we may as well use more efficient means. And the sled workouts that within the ATG system, and where however you do it with the sled strongman type training, you can get to a place metabolically that it's really difficult to get to with running. Even running 400s and things like that. Like you can go to a place of extreme metabolic challenge, and you can you'll never reach that level of challenge on the field. So you can definitely build endurance and build the ability to deal with that sort of stress in the gym, and then train specifically for your sport on the field. That was the approach that we used, and it was extremely effective. And anytime teams that I know of have gone away from that, like we're going to run ourselves into being better athletes, I haven't seen that work with the teams that I've been associated with or near. We never did it with any of my teams, but I know like at different times they've shifted in philosophies, more towards that running, and it usually ends in tears. Like it's just focus on getting better at your sport with the things that really matter in your sport, the specific movements, the team play, the coordination. And I'm a huge advocate for developing individual skill as well. With juggling, with isolated practice of footwork, with isolated practice of every component of the game. Like it doesn't. If you take the best players, like you said, it's international games, for example, it's the best players that come together, and they would crush any club team. And it does not matter who the coach is. It does not matter what the tactics are. What matters is that these guys are physically and skillfully, they're so much better than the other guys that it just doesn't matter. So that's what, we need to create, is these far superior individuals. And of course you want them to play as well together as they can. And obviously having that camaraderie and stuff like really matters. But, it's about improving the ability of every player, every athlete. You even see it in high school sports like basketball and soccer, where players are, players are encouraged, they're told not to develop their individual skill because, it's all about the team game and stuff. And that's just absolute, it doesn't work. That philosophy doesn't work. Like the team can't be better than the sum, than the parts that are within it. So, yeah, for athletes out there, like look for those other areas to improve as well, with your nutrition and with your individual skill development, your knowledge of the game. And with that, like you can add so much more to any team that you're in and progress into better teams.
Yeah, definitely. And that's such a big part. Like you said, knowledge of the game, and I think not enough young players actually study the game, and I think that would be really beneficial for most players. Like it's like, okay, who do you want to be like on the field, and how can you replicate sort of what they're doing? What do you need? What skills do you need? Like how do they pass left to right? How do they pass right to left? What different types of kicks do they have? If you're looking at a halfback. There's
100%.
things I think kids especially are missing out on that. That.
Look at the body shape, and look at all the specific abilities that athlete has. Don't worry too much about the team play stuff as a youth athlete. Worry about like the things that they're able to execute, and realize that at one point they could not do any of that. At one point, like they couldn't even walk. Like think about it. Everything has been developed through patterning and through practice. So it's about seeking the best processes to progress and develop those areas. That's what Pat is dedicating his life to in the rugby world. And there are great resources out there. So trying to recognize who has the best resources, who's getting that that progression that you want, and really be a student of those individual actions is the fastest way to improve, I think.
Yeah, definitely. All right, that's awesome, mate. Really enjoyed this.
Great to connect. Yeah, thanks for your time, Pat, and love the work that you're doing.
Thanks for coming on. Honestly, I'll just stop.